Thank you, sir. You talk fast. Whew. Jeez. All right, today we're going to talk about we let our intern go because she wasn't producing enough and other ridiculous things employers say.
She was at school, she was really hopeless. And the school in the 30s wrote to her parents and said, we think Gillian has a learning disorder. She couldn't concentrate, she was fidgeting. I think now they'd say she had ADHD. Wouldn't you? But this was the 1930s, and ADHD hadn't been invented, at this point, so it wasn't an available condition. People weren't aware they could have that. Anyway, she went to see this specialist. So this oak-paneled room, and she was there with her mother, and she was led and sat on this chair at the end, and she sat on her hands for 20 minutes while this man talked to her mother about all the problems Gillian was having at school. And at the end of it, because she was disturbing people, her homework was always late and so on, little kid of 8, in the end, the doctor went and sat next to Gillian and said, Gillian, I've listened to all these things that your mother's told me. I need to speak to her privately. So he said, wait here, we'll be back. We won't be very long. And they went and left her. But as they went out the room, he turned on the radio that was sitting on his desk. And when they got out the room, he said to her mother, just stand and watch her. And the minute they left the room, she said she was on her feet, moving to the music. And they watched for a few minutes, and he turned to her mother, and he said, Mrs. Lynn, Gillian isn't sick, she's a dancer. Take her to a dance school. I said, what happened? He said, she did. I can't tell you how wonderful it was. We walked in this room, and it was full of people like me. People who couldn't sit still. People who had to move to think. Who had to move to think. They did ballet, they did tap, they did jazz, they did modern, they did contemporary. She was eventually auditioned for the Royal Ballet School. She became a soloist. She had a wonderful career at the Royal Ballet. She eventually graduated from the Royal Ballet School, found her own company, the Gillian Dance Company, met Andrew Lloyd Webber. She's been responsible for some of the most successful musical theatre productions in history. She's given pleasure to millions, and she's a multi-millionaire.
This is the woman that he's talking about, Gillian Lynn. She choreographed Cats, The Phantom of the Opera, The Muppet Show, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and a lot more. But in regular school, she was kind of an outlier. She was an outcast. So she had to go to a dance school. She had to go to a place where there were people like her. And there were a couple of patterns at this school, right, for her. There were lots of people that she could learn with, and there were lots of people that she could learn from. And so when we think about how people learn design and development and the stuff that all the people in this room do, where do we see these conditions exist? So, I mean, we're all family here. Let's talk. Where do we see, woo? Did somebody woo that? Thank you. Okay. All right. Where do we see lots of people like us? Where do we see people that we could learn with and people that we could learn from? What are those places? Anybody have a guess? Right here. Right here? Yeah, where else? Work? Campuses? Yeah. Yeah, Twitter? Absolutely. I mean, all of those places. Places like agencies and startups and co-working spaces. There are people like us that we could learn with and people like us that we can learn from. And yet, when learning happens at agencies and startups and co-working spaces, it's kind of this exception, right? It's weird because we have to set up learning lunches because it normally doesn't happen. And we have to set up after-work programs and weekend hackathons because learning isn't really encouraged as part of work. I think there's a reason that these kind of organizations are popping up. And I'm not knocking them at all. I think they're really great. It's great that there's the code schools and the code academies and general assemblies and Skillshares of the world that are teaching other people how to do what we do. But it's a bit silly that these organizations have no critical mass initially. They have to draw people out of agencies and startups and campuses to go there to teach people. And yet the places where all of us are concentrated, not a lot of learning happens. Like, these organizations have to persuade teachers to come to them to teach stuff. This is my ragtag crew. You might see some of them in the room. I spent a little bit over a decade working in agencies and working with agencies, and for the last 3 years, I've been silently running an apprenticeship for designers and developers. And it's part of Super Friendly, it's part of the design collaborative that I started. And this is kind of what the apprenticeship looks like. This is what the sort of 9-month course looks like. I like to work with people that have zero experience with design and development. So it's not really a program for like junior designers that want to become senior designers or developers that want to become better developers. It's really for people that have a passion for it but don't really have experience in it and just need it to be sort of a means to an end, a means to some end, to having a career, to having a life, to achieving some sort of goal. And so this is kind of what it looks like. The first 3 months of the apprenticeship is just basic training. So day one for a designer is open up Photoshop or open up Sketch. Here's how you create a new document. Here's how you create a shape. Here's how you use the marquee tool. For a developer, it's here's how you write the first line of HTML. Here's the anatomy of an HTML tag. So we're starting from scratch every single time. Those 3 months, those first 3 months are really just basic training, building up the basic skills that you need. Then we get into various project work for the next 3 months. Through months 3 to 6, I have them working on projects, client projects, some paying, some not paying. I don't pay an hourly rate. I pay as they gain experience, and I have them quote me on projects. So we work on rates, we work on what they should be charging in case they go freelance afterwards or in case they go to an agency. They understand how people value money and how people will trade money for the thing that they can do well now. Thanks. That's all. After that, the next 2 months is just getting them ready to go in the workplace. I have no desire to keep them around. My design collaborative has no staff. I'm the only employee. And so at the end of 9 months, I kick them out. I say, go get a job, go get a real job. And so the 2 months before that is writing resumes, working on a portfolio, prepping for interviews, doing mock interviews, and then that last month is going out and interviewing and checking out the places that they want to work and trying to get the jobs that they want. So in doing that, I've learned a couple of things, and I have a couple of observations of things that prevent learning that I'd just like to share with you and see if you guys agree with me and see if you have some more to add to the pile. I think one of the first things that prevents learning is the system. I found this awesome quote. This is in an article on Wired magazine by a guy named David Edwards. And he said, we learn, and then after we learn, we do. So we go to school, and that's where we learn. Then after we're done school, we go to work, and that's where we do. But this approach does not map very well to personal and professional success in America today. Learning and doing have become inseparable in the face of conditions that invite us to discover. It's weird, we've created this like artificial dichotomy that says work is a place where we do and we make, and it's not the place that we learn. We do not learn here. And I think as an industry, we have to break out of this dogma. Another thing that prevents learning, profitability. How many people here work at agencies? Okay. More accurately, I think how we measure profitability generally prevents learning. So how do agencies measure profitability? Anybody have a guess? How do you know if you run a profitable company or if you're working at a profitable company? Oh, yeah, sorry.
I was going to just say cost.
Cost. And where does cost come from generally? Time. Right? That's not always true, right? But as a general sentiment, what we do is we estimate time and we try to knock out those time targets, right? So we say, okay, a thing should take this long, but if I can get it done in this long, then all the rest is going to be profit, right? Does that make sense? And I think agencies that value efficiency and things like billable hours, they seldom have room for learning because that room is taken up by profit. And the more you take that room up for learning, the more you lessen profit. So the dichotomy there is sort of diametrically opposed, where if you increase profit, you reduce the room for learning, and vice versa. So the question to you guys that I have, one of the questions is creating room for learning actually important? Is that something that we should be doing at agencies and startups and co-working spaces and all that? How many people think it is important? How many people think it's not? Nobody. Okay. I think it is. I'm glad that you're all here and agree with me because this will be an easy talk. I'm going to share a few reasons why I think it is. I think that room for learning allows you to practice good failure. I think there's a such thing as good failure and bad failure. I found this awesome chart at the Harvard Business Review, and it's a spectrum of reasons for failure. The stuff on the right is stuff that you don't want people, is ways that you don't want people to fail. You don't want them to fail because of deviance. You don't want them to fail because of inattention. Those are bad types of failure. But on the left here, These are the ways that you want your staff and your coworkers and your colleagues to fail. You want them to fail at exploratory testing. You want them to test hypotheses and fail. You want them to have uncertainty and test things out and have some failures and have some success. Those are good types of failure. I think this sums it up best for me. Thomas Edison said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that it won't work." I love that. I think another thing that prevents learning is cowardly teachers and disengaged students. So let's start with the easy one, disengaged students. You can't teach someone who doesn't want to learn. Everybody agree with that? Right? It's pretty hard to do. So that one's out of the way. But also, if you do have people that want to learn, when you have cowardly teachers, when you have teachers that aren't willing to take risks or be bold, that also prevents learning. To teach, you have to be courageous enough to reach your students. Here's some examples. You guys remember Dangerous Minds? Yeah. White lady Michelle Pfeiffer walks into urban school, can't get through to them. The next day, she puts on a leather jacket, teaches karate. Learning. How about Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society? Right? How cool was he in Dead Poets Society? I bet we all wish we had a teacher like that. Anybody have a teacher like that? A few. And I bet you what made them memorable is their courage. Their ability to reach you, their ability to reach past their podium, past their barrier between them and the student, and get right to you and be memorable in that way. Courageous teachers. Other things that prevent learning. Excuses. We all make excuses for why learning can't happen at, maybe it can happen over there, but not at my shop, not at my place, not at my co-working space, not in my team. Or worse, low self-esteem. Some of us believe that we can't teach others or that people can't learn from us. And so let's talk about some of the common excuses and let's talk about some ways to overcome them. One of the biggest ones, learning is expensive. And you know what? It's true. What I've found for me is that during my 9-month apprenticeship, an apprentice generally cost me about 400 hours of my time and about $7,000. That's not a small amount of money. Training is an investment, and I think learning is an investment too. So what do I mean by that word investment? Well, this is what Wikipedia says, so it's got to be true. Time, energy, or matter spent in the hope of future benefits actualized within a specified date or time frame. It's a little convoluted, so my version is you put in a little now to get a lot later. That's what an investment is. So let's take an example of a design shop that wants a really, really great designer. There's kind of two ways to go about that, if we generalize that. One is you go out and you hire the best designer you can. You go try to poach them from their awesome New York advertising agency, and you throw a lot of money at them, and you tell them Philly's like New York, but cooler, because it's true. That's one way to do it. Or you could take someone and grow them. Take a college grad or an intern or something, and you help grow them. And a lot of people don't choose that path because they see it as too much of an investment. So let's analyze those two paths. So with the senior designer route, right, you may throw $80,000 at them. You say, we'll give you $80,000. You can live in Philly. Cost of living is a lot lower. It'll be great. And a lot of people say, well, this is an investment in my company. But it's not an investment. An investment is when you put in a little now to get a lot later. This is immediate gratification, instant gratification. I'm going to throw money at it to get it right now. So year one, you spend $80,000 on this designer. Year two, right, you give them their annual 5% raise, so you pay them $84,000. Right, so far you've spent $164,000 on this person. Year three, they bail halfway in the middle of the year because they're good and they job hop every 2 years like everybody else does, right? You should have been cued onto that because they came to your agency, they bailed on their agency, and they came to yours, and they did the same thing to you. So they spent half the year with you, you paid them $42,000, and then you spent half the year searching for somebody just like them again. You spent $206,000. Year four, you find somebody that's just like them, but market rates have gone up, industry rates have gone up, inflation a little bit, so you're paying that person $85,000, and that person's brand new to your agency, so now you have to train them on the culture. And altogether, you've spent $291,000. So let's look at the other way. You get somebody right out of school. You pay them $40,000 a year, which they're really grateful for, to have a full-time job. You give them the 5% annual raise. Year two, $42,000 is what they're making. You've spent $82,000. Year 3, you give them their 5% annual raise. They've never had a job before. Of course, they're going to stick it out for year 3. You give them their raise. They're making $44,100. You spent $126,000. Year 3, you promote them to senior designer because they're good enough. You promote them, give them a raise. They're making $50,000. They're incredibly grateful, and they're loyal to you. They're loyal to your company, and they've been there for 4 years, and they know the ropes. And you spent $176,000. Now, just to remind you, the last number was $291,000. So let's say there's a bunch of costs that I'm not factoring in. Let's say there's training costs. My apprentices cost $7,000 on average. So let's say this one is 10, right? So maybe you spent $186,000. It's still a lot less. Maybe you've sent them to conferences. Maybe you've built them up. Maybe you spent a lot of money on them. Maybe you trained them. Maybe you bought them software. Maybe you bought them equipment. You're still spending a lot less. This is what investment looks like. Right? That first year is really difficult because you're not getting what you want. But a little bit in the beginning gets you a lot at the end. You save a lot, and you have somebody that's loyal to you. You have somebody that will work really hard for you. At the end of the same time frame, you've saved a significant amount of money, and you have a happy employee from the promotion, and they know the culture. And remember, the other number, almost $300,000. Here's another excuse. We only hire the best people. We don't hire junior people, right? You see that a lot? This is Google's career page. In here, there's a lot of words like good and great and best and leadership. This is Vimeo's career page. Vimeo is looking for extraordinary people to join our team. Those are usually not words that we find when we talk about junior designers or junior people or interns or apprentices or people that are just starting out. We don't use those words. So what they're saying, the language says, we're not looking for those people. We're looking for different kind of people. And I have a proposition here that if you're not investing in new blood at your organization will quickly atrophy. This is a quote from a guy named Tom Zaki. He's the CEO of a company called TerraCycle in Trenton, New Jersey. This is in an interview that he did for the New York Times. He said, he was talking about his hiring practices. The article's called Why We Don't Usually Look for Experience When We Hire. He said, in building a global team, I found that people who have fire in their belly, who come to learn, and who are open to adaptation are the ones who flourish. Those are the ones that do the best at his company, not the senior designer that they hired for $80,000, the junior designer that they hired for $40,000. They're the ones that succeed. So let's look at a couple of practical reasons here that you should invest in junior talent. One reason is you can afford to hire 2 or 3 junior people for the price of 1 senior hire, right? A numbers game. That's a pretty practical reason. It might not always work out for you, but it's a practical reason. Another one. Those who come with experience and credentials often have set ways. Also, they don't bring as much energy or out-of-the-box thinking as the untrained junior staff. Last one. Junior employees become company advocates when mentored well. That's really hard to do when you bring senior people in. Senior people come in and they expect to change the place. And you likely will have brought them in to do that. But junior people don't. Junior people want to assimilate. And if that's what you're looking for, that's a much better role, a much better person for that. Another excuse. We're not set up to train. We will be later, but we're just not set up for that right now. I would argue that if you're not set up for learning, you're probably doing your current employees a disservice. It's not that you're not set up for training other people, it's that you're actually not doing well for the set of employees that you have right now. I'll give you an example. Imagine this is a floor map, right? This is a bird's eye view. These are 3 long tables, and you're trying to figure out where people should sit. So what you do is you've got 2 teams of people, right? The red team and the green team, and you sit each team around the table. That makes sense. Right, the red team sits at table 1, the green team sits around table 2, right? They're sort of facing each other. One's got their computer here, the other's got their computer there, they're facing each other. You got a spare table, you put the Doritos and the Mountain Dew on that table. Right, this looks like a good agency. The last agency that I worked at was called Big Spaceship. I was in Brooklyn. And we spent a lot of time figuring out little things like where people sit and how does that affect productivity. Like so much time that the Harvard Business Review wrote a case study on where people sit. And what we figured out was, when people sit around the table, that's not bad. But if you have a team and you sit them around the table, that's actually less good than if you sat them in the aisles of the table. So you have them sit back to back. So my team, it was me, my developer, my producer, and behind me was my designer and my junior developer. And the reason that we did that was we could turn around much more quickly than we could walk around the desk to see what people are doing. So something that small, just the amount of seconds, 1 second, 2 seconds, made a difference in how we collaborate. And we still had room for the Mountain Dew and Doritos. And when you're set up like this, then you can get rid of the Mountain Dew and Doritos because you don't need those to be productive anymore. And then it's really easy to insert one junior person into that because you're already set up for it. You don't need to do new setting up for training, for learning. You can just put one person there, become part of our team, become part of our collaboration. So, how do you encourage learning at your current job? This is the guy that we heard earlier. For those of you that don't know him, this is Sir Ken Robinson. He's an educationalist, which sounds fancy. He consults with schools and school systems on how they can better educate kids. And he's got 3 principles for learning. I don't know why he's doing 5. I don't know if he can count very well, but 3 principles for learning. The first one, foster diversity by offering a broad curriculum that encourages individualization. That's his first principle for learning. Number 2, foster curiosity through creative teaching. And number 3, create your own curriculums and processes that focus less on standardized testing. Now, obviously, these are more targeted towards, say, public schools and secondary schools and elementary schools than they are agencies and startups and co-working spaces, but you get the idea. You get how this applies. So if you do want to set up your agency or your co-working space or your startup for learning, how do you do it? What's one of the things that you should do? Well, I think one of the first things you should do is you should decide on your learning model. What are you going to set up? How are you going to expect people to learn? So one question, for example, do you set up internships or apprenticeships? Now, apprentice is not just a fancy word for intern, right? We see that a lot. We're just going to stop calling them interns. We'll just call them apprentices because it sounds cooler. So back to the source, Wikipedia. An internship is a job training for white-collar and professional careers. These positions may be paid or unpaid and usually are temporary. Students can also use an internship to determine if they have an interest in a particular career, create a network of contacts, or gain school credit. By contrast, an apprenticeship is a system of training a new generation of practitioners of a trade or profession with on-the-job training and often some accompanying study, like classroom work or reading. So that's a little verbose for me. I like to boil that down. The way I see it, internship should be shallow, apprenticeship should be deep. If you have somebody that just wants to kind of dip their toe in the water and figure out if it's right for them, make them an intern. It will also set your frame of mind and their frame of mind as to how deep you're going to go in that. If you think they're going to want to go deep, that's what an apprenticeship should be. Let's consider the history of apprenticeships. Right? It started in the Middle Ages, and it was a way for mastercraft persons to employ young people. So what would happen is the master would give the young person lodging, food, and training, and in exchange, the young person would give them an inexpensive form of labor, essentially. The apprentice would usually complete a term, about 7 years, for say, a blacksmith, and then they would become a journeyman. They'd spend about 3 years as a journeyman, and then they would submit a master workpiece to the guild. If the guild approved of their master workpiece, the journeyman is admitted as a master, and then they can take on their own apprentices. This is an interesting book. It's called Table Talk. It's by Martin Luther. Martin Luther was a Catholic preacher, and he had apprentices. So he taught a lot about religion and God and science and things like that. But he would often have friends and students and apprentices to his house every weekend, and they would have dinner and just talk about stuff. And he would have some friends actually record that stuff, and they wrote it down and they compiled it into a book. Now remember, the apprentice would live with the master, so they're not just learning the craft, they're learning all sorts of stuff. How to cook, how to clean, how to live well, how to clean up after themselves, how to clean up after somebody else. And they would learn all sorts of stuff. This is the weirdest thing that I've seen people learn. This is a quote from this book. Martin Luther said, "Almost every night when I wake up, the devil is there and wants to dispute with me. I have come to this conclusion. When the argument that the Christian is without the law and above the law doesn't help, I instantly chase him away with a fart." He talked a lot about farts in this book and flatulence. That was one of his topics of the apprenticeship. Right? He didn't just teach about religion and God and science. He taught about body, gas and how you deal with it. That's what I strive to do with my apprenticeship. I mean, not teach people about farts. Well, maybe teach people about farts, but really to make sure that they're learning more than just the trade of design and development, but about life too. About things like billing, about things like how to meet deadlines, about things like how to be a responsible adult. So if we go back to our definitions, internship being shallow, apprenticeship being deep, one of the things that we notice in this internship definition is that it says it's for white collar and professional careers, whereas apprenticeships are more for trades. So that leads to the question, is web design or development white collar or blue collar? How many people say white collar? Almost nobody. How many people say blue collar? Oh, almost nobody. I found this thread on Quora. Somebody actually posted this. Is programming blue collar or white collar? And somebody commented anonymously and they said, I like to use an alternative definition of white collar and blue collar. Basically, they define it as the amount of tedium and repetitiveness involved in the work. Right? So white collar has a little tedium and little repetitiveness. Blue collar has a lot of tedium and repetitiveness. So programming can be both. It can be either white collar, use critical thinking, algorithmic analysis, etc., or it could be blue collar, refactoring code, closing bugs, tickets, etc. I really like that definition. So to me, that says either an internship or an apprenticeship could apply to what we do. We could have web design interns or web design apprentices or web development apprentices or web development interns. But I think it's important to know what level of depth you want to strive for. If you're going to institute learning in your organization, it's important to know what kind of depth you want to strive for. I think a lot of people claim to do apprenticeships, but I think they're probably closer to internships because of the level of depth and because of the learning model. I think there are a few, though, that are doing really great really great apprenticeships out there. Thoughtbot's apprenticeship looks really great. They have apprentice.io, and they talk about their apprenticeship and how they really go deep with the people that are apprenticing there. Another one, if you're not aware of it, is The Nerdery. There's a guy there named Fred Beecher, and he's exclusively in charge of apprenticeships. He doesn't do client work, he doesn't do anything, he's just running apprenticeships there. If you don't know about The Nerdery, I suggest you should read up on it, because he's done a lot of really great research on how people should learn there and in that environment. Another tip on instituting learning at your organization, be aware of what you're actually teaching. So what is the thing that you're imparting? What kind of wisdom are you imparting on apprentices or interns? The craft stuff is easy. Design, development, HTML, CSS, Photoshop, that stuff's easy. The skills are hard, right? Being a good designer, having a good eye. Mimicking a design style, that's easy. Developing curiosity and a worldview, that's really hard to teach. That doesn't mean it's impossible. It's just harder because it's a level of depth that's deeper. Doing a decent job at anything you're doing, that's easy. Screwing up on a job and not quitting, that's really hard. Learning a technique, that's easy. SAS, non-destructive Photoshop techniques, I don't know. Meeting deadlines, scoping, creating reasonable work pace, that stuff's hard. Which of those things are you teaching? It's okay if you, either or, it's okay. But which one? Which one are you going to try to impart? What are you going to infuse into that apprentice, into that intern? I love this one. It's a short one. Hands off the keyboard when you're teaching. One of my mentors and my teachers from Drexel, Jervis Thompson, he would always tell me this when I was TAing. Hands off the keyboard. Don't touch the keyboard. If I have to go, just let me do it. I'm not teaching well enough. Hands off the keyboard. I sometimes sit with my arms crossed so I don't touch the keyboard. I sit on my hands so I don't touch the keyboard. It's hard. But when you're teaching, no hands, hands off the keyboard. I guess the last thing that I want to say is just relax when you're teaching. If you're teaching, if you're in a position to teach, people are willing to receive stuff from you. There's no pressure there. You can be wrong, that's okay, but just relax. No pressure. Don't worry about billing, don't worry about billable hours, don't worry about any of that stuff. Because that's not an environment for learning. If you're creating an environment for learning, it should be relaxed for both the teacher and the learner. You're not looking for billable hours. You're investing. So if you're investing, take that time to relax and really spend that time infusing those interns and those apprentices and those junior people. So I want to do something a little bit different now. I have all of my apprentices that I've ever had are in this room right now. Current apprentices and former apprentices. So they've agreed to come up here just for a couple minutes and just tell you a little bit about what they've been doing, what they've done, what they're currently going through. And I was thinking we could have a little bit of a Q&A if you guys have any questions for them or for me about that. So apprentices, please join me.
I'm Greg. Currently work at Blue Cadet, wonderful, wonderful agency. I started this apprenticeship almost just over a year ago. It was December 1st last year. After 9 months, literally interviewed with Dan, or set up interviews and everything with Dan, and interviewed at Blue Cadet. And it's been 15 months now that I'm working at Blue Cadet and love every minute of it.
Hey everybody, I'm Joshua Luciano, and started the apprenticeship at the same time with Brett. So we were both in an 8 by 10 room before the office space was created, so it was very hot in that room at the time of the summer. But after my 9 months, I went on as a freelancer for almost 2 years. And actually on Monday, I started working for Net Plus, a digital agency. So this is my first week as a junior designer. So it's been awesome. First week.
You guys, yeah, good.
What's up, guys? I'm Jay. Started about 4 months ago. I'm studying this HTML, CSS thing down. Scoping is hard. It's hard to scope something you don't know. It's like every time. Yeah, it's been awesome. Learning from this guy, and hopefully I think these guys in 9 months. Good job. One of the best. Remember my name, Gerald.
Hey guys, my name is Coral. I've been at Super Friendly for about 3 months now. In about a couple of weeks, I guess I'm going to start my first real product. So I'm excited. I'm doing design and just kind of learning a little bit of everything. I'm excited. That's it.
Good morning, guys. My name is Erhard. This is the end of my second week with Dan. So far, I've just learned like HTML and some CSS stuff. It's really, really new to me. I've never done anything like this before, so I'm really excited to get into it. And it's nice to see these guys, how they've progressed and where they're at now. So I'm kind of hoping to be at that level when I get to that time frame.